Thank you. Thank you. Our next two speakers will be talking on the SEZs and CPAC and others that you have already put in your last slide also. So I now invite Dr. Usman Chohan to share his thoughts on Pakistan's industrial policy and the industrial development of Pakistan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, esteemed colleagues and seniors, and compliments to ISSI for raising such a multidimensional forum for discussing so many aspects. Since I'm following so many eminent speakers, I can essentially breeze through my presentation since there is so much substance in what has been said by predecessors. So, industry and SEZs for Pakistan's geoeconomics. We'll go through it quickly because a bit of background and then the current situation and some thoughts on it. That's the structure. So it's good to look at the thinking of the Qaid when we frame big policies and big questions. And his quote that's really stands out is that, yeah, mechanization and industrial efficiency is fine, but that is not the be-all, end-all of a contented and happy society, which is our goal. And that is, I think, very important for us to keep in mind, that we have all of these arms to realize a goal, and industrialization is one of them. And we can focus on it, but not at the detriment of the larger goals that have been raised by previous speakers today. We had good plans. We did a lot, and that history has been covered by previous speakers. It was an approach that was adopted by other countries. Then we took some mistakes, like our keynote speaker today. I mentioned nationalization as one of them, and we've never really recovered in the past 50 years, as he said. And today, manufacturing is a smaller, it's growing slowly, and it's a smaller percentage of exports and a percentage of GDP as well. So we have questions about why. There's operational and tactical level things, and not just industrial policy as a strategy, but you have the smuggling, rampant under-invoicing, the disproportionate burden on industry for taxation purposes, knee-jerk measures to meet revenue shortfall. These have all been previously mentioned. The misdeclaration of imports, etc. Poorly negotiated trade agreements is a reasonable argument. High input costs, the energy crisis that we've been going through, that we have gone through, but it is improving. The tariff policy, etc. I mean, there's so many facets to look through. And that's a lot of problems for a very simple economy. Economic complexity, what are we working on? House linen, rice, people's clothes. I mean, it's a very low complexity economy, and yet it has so many different reasons why it is so. So there's a complexity behind its simplicity. As a result, it's deindustrializing prematurely. In the same way that I find that people my age and younger, पढ़ाई करने से पहले ही साइंसदान बन जाते हैं, हम develop करने से पहले ही deindustrialize कर चुके हैं, and we're not integrated well into global value chains, as was mentioned by the previous speaker and two other persons before. We do need to generate 2 to 3 million jobs a year, so there is an economic security aspect just to keeping a labor force in industry, but not necessarily industry alone. So you should set targets about how manufacturing should be relative to other metrics in terms of exports, in terms of GDP, and it's ambitious. What we need to do requires a concerted effort. So in that light, SEZs have been positive as part of CPEC's broader architecture. CPEC is always shown as a game changer. It is, but the phase 2 of CPEC requires much more participation from the Pakistani side than phase 1 did, in terms of getting the public and the private either together, public, private, or public and private, all various iterations. And there's many sorts of incentivization mechanisms that are given. The Board of Investment has come up with lovely SimCity style architecture, where you would have basically self-contained areas, and they would be able to leverage transportation, logistics, manufacturing, utilities, and all those things to create pockets of rapid growth in the country to accelerate an industrial policy as well as an overall economic policy. That is the logic behind special economic zones. We take this as an important lesson when we learn that special economic zones over the past 40 years have shot up. China is seen as the best example of that. They have many economic zones, but China, for all of its generalization that we can do, China is an idiosyncratic case. Why? Because it was transitioning from one system to another. So then I ask you, are you transitioning from one system to another? And if you are, what are you going to do with the system that was there before? And what I mean by that is, let's say you have industry thriving in these SEZs, then what happens to the industry and the economy that is outside the SEZs? What happens to the industrialist that isn't in the SEZs? What happens to the existing participants? Are you really transitioning, or why are you creating this favoritism? And keep in mind that the early phase of Pakistan's development did pick winners and losers. For example, in West Pakistan, it was the export licenses that were accorded to certain people that afforded them special privileges. And there's a lot of international work that has been done in economic history on that. When our Prime Minister Sohrawardi Saab wanted to get more export licenses to East Pakistan, that was essentially the time he was out. So keep in mind that creating winners and losers is something even China now regrets to some degree. So Deng Xiaoping's original thinking has now been accepted as a useful transition point, but now they're going towards a more socialist thing where the winners have become too big, and that's why you see how they're treating Jack Ma and all these, and the private tuition industry, and all of these winners to have a more balanced system across the country, that all of China can prosper, and that resentments don't come among the winners and the losers in the 40-year breakneck growth. The same thing applies to us. SEZs can be a good vehicle, but we shouldn't count on it to solve every problem. And I'm raising that in the context of a national development strategy as it is informed in the national security policy. Because if economics is at the core, then the core must be very well situated to balance all the other factors. And so we have reform to do that has been amply covered by the eminent speakers, and looking at industry is a key part of that. SECs may be, but they may not be. And it depends on how they're done, who goes there, and what happens to those who don't go there. So national economic sovereignty and development are key parts of that. And I want to keep it as short as possible, but I think you get the gist that our economy being at the core of the new national security policy, which has been a subject of intense deliberation and great deep thinking by Muid Yusuf and his team, then we have to think about what the implications and second order effects are. And that is my final statement on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Usman. May I now invite Dr. Liaquat to add on the points?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for having me. Much has been said about